Today we have Ray Gallen presenting. I'm very pleased to have him on board. We'll be attending the event, hopefully on one of the panel discussions. Ray actually has got an interesting background. There's 40 years in the communication business, varied ranges, even from radio broadcasting and radio producing. So we should enjoy his good tones today. But more recently, in the last 20 years, has been a technical communication specialist and now running his own consultancy, CultureCom, and working with people like IBM, Alcatel, some very large companies, and other smaller firms. So I'm very pleased to have Ray here today. Ray, maybe I can hand over to you and we'll run through the presentation and hopefully invite questions that can be put into the question box if people are familiar with the interface for the GoToWebinar. And also I believe you've got some polls that you'll be posting during your presentation for some interaction.
That's right, Julian. Thanks a lot. And thanks everyone for attending. You can see on the upper right corner of this slide there's a little logo marked transformation. It's about my newest activity, which I'm quite excited about, which is called the Transformation Society. It's a research and training operation that we're starting here in Barcelona. And you're going to be hearing more about this over the year. It's an organization that is oriented towards training and consulting for high-level executives and also for the education sector, built around using communication as a means for adapting to the rapidly accelerating rate of change. So that's something that I think is very, very important for all of us, and I think it's something that all of us who work with content are involved in. So I hope that you'll all sort of follow what goes on with that. And
Ray, will you be sharing the logo for that? I see you had a logo earlier. Is that you sharing that on the screen?
Is it not on the screen now? It should be.
Okay, I'm not seeing that just at the moment.
Okay, and now do you have the logo?
We do indeed.
Okay, good. So that means you'll have the rest of my slides as well, which is the important thing. Okay, so let's carry on with this. The title is Expert Users, Your Most Important Asset, and you'll see as a subtitle, Building a Better End-to-End Customer Experience. The idea is that we, as people who do technical information, have a role to play in what people call customer experience. And here's an example of what I mean by that. How many of you have ever seen this sort of thing before, right? It's something that I think most of us find is not helpful, but even more importantly, the question is, what impression does a user get of your company if this is what shows up on the screen when they get into trouble? As a customer, if I'm a customer of your product, I want to know a certain number of things. I want to know, what does it do? What is it good for? How can I access it? I want to be able to do certain things. I want to be able to do a set of tasks, and especially I want to be able to get out of trouble. I want to explore sometimes. When I'm not in a hurry, when I'm not pressed, that's when I might want to know more about the product, how others use it, and what options I have available to me. I might want to understand, so go more in depth about why I need to do a particular task or about how something works. This is what we call decision support. I might need to make decisions about what's important, what I need to do next. And I obviously will need to integrate and combine what I'm doing with the exterior. We have to remember about all of our customers that our product is not the only thing they're spending their time with. They get interrupted. They do all kinds of other things, and we're just a part of their working day. So the question is, the main question is, does your product help me do this? And this is the first poll that I'd like to run with you, which is to just ask very simply, does your product, and when I say your product, I don't mean your user assistance, your online help, or anything else. I mean the products that you are connected with or that you are working with. Does it help me, the customer, do all these things on the screen? And I'm going to just open that poll now. And it says that you are all seeing the poll, so please do fill it in.
Okay, we're getting a good mixed response there.
Yeah, quite a... Okay, I think we're pretty well done, so let's close it and show you the results. And as you can see, it's pretty evenly distributed, about a third in each category. And really, we should have, ideally, 100% yes responses. So what we're seeing here is that even in the eyes of those of you who are, in fact, professionals in this field, we're not altogether sure that what we're doing is getting us to where we need to be. So one of the things that I have been saying all during the entire year is, excuse me for having gone backwards here. Why is it doing that? Why is it going backwards? Okay. Okay, one of the things I've been saying for the entire year is that we need to accept uncertainty. And it's true. But at the same time, if the user gets lost, how does he or she find a way to get back? And one of the things that can happen, of course, is that we can provide too much detail. And if we're doing so, we just help them get further lost in the morass of detail. And this is what minimalism is about, of course. And one of the primary tenets of minimalism is that we need to help the user troubleshoot and get out of problems. We don't necessarily have to solve all the user's problems for them. In fact, we don't know, that goes back to the uncertainty, we don't know what problems the user is going to have, but we do know that we can help them get out of those problems. And that means emerging from chaos, or at least an impression of chaos. Complex problems are simply a lot of simple problems all tangled up together like this entangled ball on the screen, and they can seem chaotic, and that of course goes for complex products. But quite naturally, even if we do nothing, order tends to emerge from chaos in its own way. The problem is that its own way might not necessarily be positive. So what our job is, faced with these complex entanglements and with these seemingly chaotic processes, is that we need to reiteratively help users find positive, constructive emergences from complexity, because no matter what we do to produce well-designed user experience and well-designed interfaces and well-designed user assistance, all of our products are very, very complex, and that we can't change. And in fact, they're getting even more so. So the trick to getting users over the complexity bump is to make experts out of them. Now, how would we do that? Well, one of the ways is to make sure that we have a content strategy that treats user assistance as part of the overall communication strategy of the entire organization. That means that we can't be in our little TechCom silo anymore, and that user assistance has to work with the rest of the product in order to build cognitive demand. By cognitive demand, I mean we want our users to want to learn more, to have the desire, probably because they think it's fun. So that's the main thing that we need to work on, and one of the most important things. So when we talk about making expert users, the question arises, what do we mean by that? What is, in fact, mastery? And we can look at it on three levels, basically. On a first level, we are talking about just basic how-to stuff. What button do I push? So if we're talking about photography, we'd be talking about how do I use the camera? How do I turn it on? How do I set the focus? How do I take a picture? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so those are explicit instructions and include things like features, buttons, menus, and so on. The second level takes us to the question of what do we mean to take a good photograph? What is a good photograph, actually? So that means that we need to develop some hands-on practice. We have to get some idea of things like composition and control of the lighting, backlighting, front lighting, different specialized settings on the camera, and so on. So that's a combination of factual comprehension, knowing certain facts, knowing that, for example, if you've got a very, very strong backlighting situation, your faces are going to come up in silhouette. That's something that's purely factual. But then something implicit, which is that might be a nice artistic effect that we want to use under certain circumstances. And in other certain circumstances, we need to provide some fill lighting on the faces and so on. Then we get finally to the level of real mastery. And when we get to real mastery, we're dealing with more than one thing. We're dealing with decision-making, in fact, where we decide how, what, when, but we also start collaborating with people. And what I mean by collaborating, for example, in the case of photography, would be to share, as we do online and social networks and so on. We share our contexts, we share common references, and we start to make judgments about our own and others' contributions to that shared space. So we start to have aesthetic opinions about our own work, and aesthetic opinions about our friends' photographs. That's the point at which we reach some level of mastery or expertise. Now, taking that farther, let me show you here, and some of you may have seen this particular diagram already. It's a three-dimensional model for expertise that starts with a horizontal axis. On the left of this axis, we have the kind of thematic knowledge that a subject matter expert will have. And on the right, we have mastery of the code of the product. For example, if it's software, it would be language, interface, iconography, things like that. On the vertical axis, the y-axis, we have at the bottom the just basic memorization, learning procedures by rote, and at the top, a kind of cognitive construction and process reasoning. That is, a kind of process by which we are able to not only learn a procedure, but generalize from that procedure to other procedures, take concepts into account, learn concepts by actually doing procedures and making them happen. And then on the z-axis, we have on the bottom left the notion of significant individual context. That's the contingency. That's, I need to do this right now, and all I want to know is how do I get it done? And on the top right, we have the kind of sharing, mentoring, and social integration that I was talking about in the last slide about photography. So if we look at all this, we take all these three axes together in 3 dimensions and call it a user learning space, the question that arises for us is, where in this space do you want your users to be? And not only where, but when, because there are times when you might want them to be, for example, down here because they need a quick answer, a solution to a problem right now. And there will be other times when you want them up here mentoring and sharing and working with their colleagues, building expertise, and also bringing you feedback about what you're doing and about your product. And so what I can say is that we, as information designers and as information architects, creators, etc., we are the people who design these things for our user learners. And the way that we architect the elements that we create and the way that they're integrated into our product is absolutely critical, which is why we have to be working with a lot of other people in the company and not just be at the end of the food chain writing down what engineers said they did. This top right corner here in the back is the corner where most of your expert users will find themselves. And that's the area that we're going to focus on in this particular discussion today. But there are different kinds of expert users. For example, there is the expert user of the type who is the gardener. The gardener knows about flowers because he or she is an expert in that particular field. That's a producer's kind of expertise. It comes from imagining, planning, creating, and marketing a product. But there's also a user's expertise. And the user's expertise comes from exploring different functions in different contexts, right? The doctor is the expert on treating diseases, but patients know the symptoms that they've got in their own bodies. The gardener is an expert in botany, but a bee is an expert about flowers from personal experience and need. The bee doesn't know anything about botany, but experiences the flower in all its aspects. And that's why customers who might not be aspects in manufacturing a product are, in fact, the experts in their own needs, and therefore their expertise is of interest to us, or at least I think it is. And this is where the next poll comes in. I'm going to ask you, in fact, why we should care about users' expertise, and I'd ask you to fill in those answers now. Just take a few moments to do that. You can check more than one of these, huh?
Yeah, we've made this a multi-choice one, so hopefully we'll have a few more.
Okay, I'm seeing. All right. 40% of you have voted. Get a few more votes in there.
Come on, yeah, let's wake them up.
Okay, I think just about everybody who wants to vote has done. Oh, there's still more votes coming in. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's close down the poll and let's have a look at the results. So, only 17% of you said that it was important to avoid potential lawsuits or regulatory problems. Actually, I'm quite surprised at that. Having worked in the healthcare area, I can tell you I think it's actually an extremely important aspect of this because when you work in an area like that or when you work in heavy machinery, it's entirely possible that people's lives are at stake. So that can be actually an extremely important reason. Now, half of you said that it's also important to create product evangelists, and I see 83% are interested in the feedback. I like that. I certainly agree with you. And half of you said also that there's no need for them to be experts just to be able to use the product. I'm surprised at that given the 83% saying getting useful feedback. That somehow to me seems like a clash. I'm very happy that nobody said it's the user's problem. It's always our problem. Now, what I'd like to say about this is that, in my view, when we talk about user experience or customer experience, even though we may work inside a single silo, it's very important that we think of ourselves as always being responsible for all the customer experience from end to end, from A to Z. It's all of us who need to be responsible for that, all of us in the company, all of us doing the work. So now let's look at a scale of cognition here, and we see here an interesting sort of scale of acquisition of different kinds of expertise. I'm trying to find my pointer and not finding it so I can point to you.
I'm seeing it moving around actually.
Are you?
Yeah,
well,
I was. Yep. Stop.
Okay.
Yep. It's in the top left. Just above
the top left.
No, it's just above your as Rich's. Oh yeah. Okay. It is showing definitely.
Yeah. I'm just not seeing it on my screen, so never mind. But as it says here, the richer our content gets, the more complex our knowledge gets, and that leads us to a point of confusion sometime. And this is again speaking to that question of getting untangled from complexity. The place where that happens is at these two top levels here, where we begin to reflect on and evaluate content, and then at a higher level, reflect on and evaluate the form of the message. These two areas are the feedback that we can get from expert users that are invaluable to us. Because when users can reflect on and evaluate our content, they're telling us this is helpful, this is not helpful. But even beyond that, if they can tell us the way in which you're delivering this information to me is useful, or it could be better if it were done in some other way, that's also information that that we don't have, we're not able to determine just on our own. We need that feedback from those people, the people who are actually using our content, in order to help us have that kind of user's expertise and not just producer's expertise. And I can tell you that producer's expertise can, in fact, be dangerous sometimes. This is an example, and I actually think it's kind of sad, this story, but, well, you'll see. This is something called the Neo-Nurture Infant Incubator, and it was actually named one of Time Magazine's 50 best inventions of the year 2010. And it was invented by someone named Timothy Prestero, and he and his team basically wanted to design an incubator for countries that had a very low level of technology. He basically said, okay, we've got countries with not very much technology. We know that if we throw in a multi-million-dollar incubator into a hospital, it'll work just fine until it breaks down, and then probably there won't be enough technology to do the repairs to fix it. There won't be money for parts, etc., and it just won't work. So he looked around in countries with low levels of technology to see what are they good at, technologically speaking. And what he found was they were really good at keeping old cars going. So he then set out to make an infant incubator from car parts on the theory that then auto mechanics could actually maintain these things and keep them running. This was a really exciting idea. I think it's really exciting, but guess what? Hospitals didn't see it as a good customer experience. And I think probably it's the low-tech model that they didn't like, but they saw it as poor customer experience, and so it's remained a prototype. And I think that's, in some ways, I think it's really a shame. But it goes to show you, if you aren't dealing also with your users, and the users in this case are the hospitals, you can have great expertise, great knowledge, and still miss the boat. Now, one of the other things that we need to be concerned with is a lot of us have talked a lot about how changes in generation are changing the way people interact. And according to Professor Henry Jenkins of the Stanford University's Annenberg School of Communications, the current generation that we call the millennials are developing a very, very new kind of participatory culture, which is based on things like affiliations, expressions, different kinds of collaborations, and circulation of information, information passing from one thing to another. And these are done in both formal and informal ways on online communities centered around various forms of media. These are communities of interest that are developed. And these are creating new forms such as digital sampling, mashups, and so on. And these are happening in a way that's very different from older generations. And I'm an old guy. I come from a generation that always was looking to make long-term change, to make intense commitment. It seems that the millennial generation now is looking for short, quick return on investment, and by return on investment, I'm talking about investment of effort and time, and talking about the fact that they want to do good things in the world, but not necessarily have to take a long time for that to happen. That's very different from my generation, and that means that when we want to create communities of expert users around our products and get feedback, we have to do it in a different way from the way that, say, I would have done it, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So how do we build this sort of participatory culture? We have to rebuild and rethink the entire end-to-end customer experience, including roles, services, functions, and that demands a completely collective approach. We need to have a set of values for our company that is tailored to the customer base, and we need to use social networks in order to provide experiences for people that will feel individualized and unique, and we need to use the community to resource all the different possible ways of facing different demands from different people. So what we're talking about is using all the different media available to us, not just one. Just as people go through our user information through different doors. Some people, for example, in software, like to use keyboard shortcuts. Others like to use icons or toolbar buttons, and others like to use menus. In the same way, we have to provide access via different social media, and unlike, say, companies like Google and so on, we really should be sharing with our users what data we're tracking. They should know what we're tracking so that they can feel confident and trust us. And so a very interesting note is that in France, they're actually about to create a new type of company that functions somewhere in between a for-profit company and an association. And they're doing exactly to meet the needs of this participatory culture that has changed the values that they want to see from companies. It's changed the values that they want to see in their user experience and in their customer experience. So we're looking at a much more value-oriented society than we have perhaps in the past, and we're looking at a much more value-oriented approach to the way that people interact with products. So what I'm proposing here is that what we need to do is to build what I call integrated stakeholder communities. These are not user groups or user forums, but really integrated communities that are built on internet and that are built in the social network arena. So that means we're working with information developers, maybe coders and interface designers too, all of our internal stakeholders. We're also working with marketing, pre-sales, administration. In fact, anyone in the company, inside the company, that you can get interested in participating in this. And we're talking about involving, above all, expert users, but also our beginners and people who are merely curious. The primary objective in this is to create an integrated, collaborative community that builds value, and that value then gets reinjected back into the system. So a stakeholder community basically operates in three areas. The first area is the basic body of knowledge. How do I do this? And also that contingent need part, how do I do it now? Am I sure I want or need to do this? How do I get real work done? The second area is the area of shared strategies and experience, where you might say, I'm having trouble doing this. Anyone else have trouble, or does somebody know a great way to do this? Or you might just say, shout out, I found a great way to do something. We as information designers need to go out, look at this stuff, and integrate it back into our products. And then there's the notion that in this community we build for the product and for the group a common vision, a collaborative development ethos, and a shared space in which we can do that, and that builds on the part of our customers buy-in and loyalty. And that's something extremely precious. So if you take this whole field and look at it, you can say this is an area in which we can evaluate these things. And we can say which things are really helpful, which things could be improved, and even propose solutions. In order to do that, we have to have an extremely well-designed overall content strategy, which doesn't just include our user assistance, but includes everything, including embedded messages in the product, like error messages, screen messages, all kinds of screen text, and so on. Now, in this evaluation process, we can measure, as you see on the graph, an overall evaluation of how we're doing, but we can also even measure the profiles of individual people, so that if you look at this on the numeric scale, we have somebody who may have a low basic knowledge, may be considered a beginner, and so you would see that the red dot there on the left side of the screen would be that person's individual place in this field. However, that person may have a fairly good sense of strategy and may be out there communicating with people, asking questions and so on, and so might be pretty high up on that level. And then on the level of understanding and shared principles, that is on social sharing, might even be even more advanced, and so be right up there at the top of the curve. And as you can see, by comparing an individual's position relative to the average of all the participants in the community, we can quickly make evaluations of how each person is doing in all the different important areas of these stakeholder communities. So that gives us a way to have a good idea of how we're doing, whether we are in fact being productive, and to give us some metrics to take back to our bosses to help us justify the fact that we're spending time doing this. Now, there are some implications for stakeholder communities. As cooperation builds, obviously the community's self-image will grow in stature, and so people start to think beyond that contingent need, you know, the how do I do this now thing. They start to think what I do can be useful for others, and what others do has an effect on what I can use. So, for example, if you don't tag your YouTube videos very well, that makes them hard to find, and that affects other people in the community. So, and then as value from the community is captured, and as it gets back inside that community, inside that system, the customers who participate in this community adhere to the product and they adhere to the company. They start to feel more and more loyal. And when they feel that they've contributed to its design and to its development, that's really when we get to the point that that we're really getting something back from these people, and we're really not only gaining information from them, but building their loyalty. And that brings me to the next poll that I'd like to run with you, which is the question, do you think that the role that you have now, the role you have today, is one that includes both information development and aspects of marketing? And I don't mean should it, I mean the role that you actually have today. Does it have some impact or some relationship to marketing? Okay, we're getting a nice range of answers there. Okay, I think most of you voted. We'll close the poll and show you the results. So, some little over 40% feel that you have nothing to do with marketing. About 30% yes, and close to 30% say yes, but they don't let me do both. That's an important problem that we have to overcome, and that's part and parcel of this notion that we're all involved in the user experience. The fact is that marketing is not or should not be a dirty word for us. It should be, in fact, something that we embrace in the sense that what we are doing is good marketing for our product, for helping users gain access to our products and to build their loyalty to it. And that's what I mean when I say that we, as information developers and as content strategists and so on, have a role to play in this, and it's through these stakeholder communities. A community, of course, needs to be animated, and in a lot of Romance languages, French, Spanish, Italian, and so on, the word that in English we often call moderator is an animator, animateur in French, for example. And I rather like that word because for me, moderation implies damping down or controlling or reducing something, whereas animation implies stimulation. And that's what we need to do. The animator, and that's probably you in developing these integrated stakeholder communities, is somebody who has to help guide the community toward finding its common vision, and is also somebody who is a catalyst that helps vectorize the community. By vectorizing, I mean simply performing actions. The usual way in which user feedback has been integrated in products is that we have a set of external stakeholders on one side, and we have various user communities which may or may not have anything to do with our companies on the other side, with the poor TechCom in the middle trying to feed all this into the product and possibly succeeding or possibly not, but certainly feeling the squeeze. Occasionally, if you also do user testing and research, that gets fed primarily one way from the internal stakeholders to the external users. The model that I'm actually proposing to you is a different one in which all of this stuff is integrated. And so you see here inside the integrated stakeholder community, you have your SMEs, marketing, TechCom, user experience, all the different aspects of this product community. And I've highlighted user testing and research because the user testing and research is the first thing that needs to be fed back into the product. And that's done through a series of actions. And these actions that you see now in red in the cloud are the things that we need to be concerned about. These are the things that we, as animators of those stakeholder communities, need to catalyze and vectorize. Not only does all this stuff go back into the product, and of course there's a common area here where we have an overlap between the stakeholder community and the product itself, because I include the product as a living part of that community. But we can also feed some of this stuff out into learning and training, which some of you may have some interaction with. And so from our learning management systems, we can also get feedback from trainees that go back into our communities and into our products. The simplest way to integrate feedback in content is to ask questions. Questions not only tell you what a person wants to know, they also tell you a lot about what that person already knows. For example, in a different webinar that I presented, one person asked this question that you see here on the screen, and was about, I was talking about Kanban information delivery and progressive disclosure. And so this is what I was able to deduce from this person's question. First of all, the questioner already has looked into ideas like lean information flow and has some knowledge of them, and that fits into that body of knowledge sector of the stakeholder community. That person also attended a different webinar in the same series where I talked about progressive disclosure, same thing, and that that person has integrated an understanding, is functioning near the top of that cognitive spiral I presented a little bit earlier, and has been able to therefore integrate ideas, reflect and evaluate on them, and frame a question that goes beyond what was specifically discussed in the webinar session. So that's where we get to the notion of shared strategy. In asking the question also, the participant was able to share his or her own observation with the community. Not only the community of those people who are attending the webinar, but also those who would later watch the recording. And that goes to that third segment in the evaluation diagram that I showed you of shared concepts, principles, and values. So based on that, community members might be motivated to look into lean information, and if there were an appropriate forum, which we didn't have in that particular situation, but if there had been one, they might also be motivated to continue to discuss in that community their conclusions and their observations about what happened. So another thing that I think is very important in these integrated stakeholder communities is an idea that comes from Tim O'Reilly, who said, create more value than you capture. And I would add, capture a lot, which means, of course, create even more. And how you do that? Obviously, use your animators as enablers for participants in the community, as facilitators. Encourage open structures that facilitate lots of different kinds of interactions. And one example that I gave here is Google Plus Circles rather than Facebook Friends, in that Google Plus Circles are much more open and much more accessible than is a group of Facebook Friends. Always use your own judgment. You're there also with your own expertise. You're there as the specialist in information development. But before you make your judgment, before making any judgment, listen carefully to other people's ideas and listen to how they contribute to that community, and provide multiple venues. We talked about that just a moment ago. And do everything you can to foster and encourage creativity, to let ideas flow. When you're deciding whether or not to adopt someone's idea, things that are really important to take into account, because just because somebody says something doesn't mean you're going to adopt it. Whoops, sorry. You need to ask, is it viable for more than one particular situation? If a solution is really neat but only works in one situation, you can't generalize it, it's probably not something you want to take on board. Also, if you're in a regulated environment or a situation like the one I mentioned earlier of heavy machinery where health, safety, lives are at stake, are there implications for that? Again, is it generalizable to other tasks, other situations, other objects? So is it a useful concept to integrate? And is it robust? Does it have legs? Will it last? Will it adapt as new versions of the product are developed? And finally, ask for input, but don't promise to publish it. Simply promise to take it seriously and do follow up on that promise. You absolutely must be coherent and make good on your promises to your users. So once you've captured value, how do you create more value from it? One way is integrating good material everywhere. Obviously, make new user assistance objects of whatever kind, depending on what it is and how it's organized inside your product and company, and give attribution to that. So make sure that people know that you've taken so-and-so customer's suggestion. Publish tips and tricks on your website, again with attribution. And when I say with attribution, I mean for your internal stakeholders as well as for your customers, because you want to also build adherence to this community on the part of your internal stakeholders. And if they see clear, positive feedback coming back from their effort to participate in this, they will buy in as well. You can, of course, use tools like Captivate or Camtasia or other to create training demos and videos. And if a community member is really good at it, well, you can ask that person to do their own demo and maybe collaborate with them and publish it to some sort of training facility that you've got. And of course, monitor both how the students do and how well that training element does. You can, of course, also create a YouTube channel and keep it populated with this new stuff all the time. That will also bring people to your doorstep. In short, make improvements everywhere all the time. If something isn't working, don't be afraid to put it out to the community and ask them for feedback. Let them solve problems, but do control excessive negative criticism. This is a touchy subject, and being a good moderator or animator involves sometimes having back-channel private conversations with people who are either negative or in some way flaming. When I say negative criticism, I don't mean that you only want, good positive feedback. I mean that you want to avoid a negative frame of mind in this. You want negative criticism to be positively framed. So be a good curator and curate the contributions of all these people. Encourage debate, don't stifle it, and know when to stop. One of the big problems with online forums is that closure is very hard to come by. And it's up to you as the animator, and again as the information specialist, to say, okay, we're going to close this particular discussion, time now for a different one. Do remember that this is an iterative process on this spiral of cognition, and that nothing, absolutely nothing, will buy more loyalty from both your customers and your internal SMEs and other colleagues than including them in your decision making, making them feel valued, recognized, and included. And that is why they are so valuable to you, and why you want expert users, people who really understand your product, and you want to do everything you can to encourage them to get involved in that process. Finally, this is complicated. It is difficult. It is sometimes requiring us to fight the good fight inside and outside our companies, and that means be steadfast, take root, and do as much as you can to encourage and make progress and help these ideas take root in your company. And with that thought, I will thank you for listening, and I guess we have some time for some questions still, Julian.
Yeah, certainly. I've not seen any come up as yet, but if anybody does post some now, we can run through them. Otherwise, we'll close the recording and post it for future reference. And of course, people can email you with the email address shown on the screen.
Absolutely. Please feel free to do it.
Lovely. Well done, Ray. That was very interesting, and a number of thought-provoking ideas. Let's hope that we can raise some of these subjects at Congility at the conference, especially in the forums.
I hope so, yes.
In the panel discussions. Yeah.